Hello and welcome back to Primal Pod and Cast, brought to you by the Arc of E Network. My name is Noah, and with me once again, my fantastic co-host who has journeyed through this entire season with me, Mr. Mikey Chappelle. What
Hey
is up,
everyone.
sir? Hello.
Nothing much. Just trying to keep my emotions in check.
I literally, as I was mentally preparing to come up here and record this episode, I was just like, oh, I'm getting emotional just reliving the episode. So this will be a very interesting attempt at a podcast. We're here to discuss season 2, episode 10 of Primal. Is it Echoes of Eternity? I don't even have it in front of my face. And I actually watched this one the night of, so I'm a little more removed from it than I usually am. Echoes of Eternity, is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay, I'm confirming now.
Is it through or of?
It sure is. Yes, Echoes of Eternity. I'm quite shocked, IMDb. Like, how is this one of the lowest ranked of the season? What's going on here?
Might just be new.
It's possible. And granted, I haven't read much fan reaction. I'm curious to see what people think. I have you looked at anything post this episode? Have you read any Genndy articles?
I just read his Entertainment Weekly interview that came out like 3 days ago.
Okay.
So
we know some things that were confirmed afterwards, and given how this episode ends, I think they weren't that shocking. I was pretty prepared for that. So we can approach talking about this entire episode and the series as a whole up to this point as a beginning, middle, and end, because this is it for Spear and Fang as far as this journey has gone. There will be a season 3 of Primal. We know that, but we do not know what it will be. But we do know that it's not going to feature our two main protagonists. Their story is done. And he did at least, I don't know if it was all pulled from one interview and I was getting pull quotes from different articles, but I read like 3 separate articles that seemed like they all talked to him. And he definitely at least said, like, you know, if the fans really, really wanted it, I might pick up where this left off. Oh, that's all I'll say for now, even though, again, everybody already watched the episode. But
the stipulation is we had to riot, though. Like, all the fans had to actually riot.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I'm like, no, I kind of would be more excited by what you've talked about in the past, which is now it becomes anthology style and we just go to a different time period and we apply the same principles, but, you know, completely different story, different characters. That's what I'm excited to see. So let's talk about how things wrapped up. Tail end of last episode. I mean, literally the cliffhanger was the flame Viking, the undead Viking coming after them. And so I was prepared for like, oh, dude, are we about to have a 22-minute battle? Like, and that's that. But it didn't turn out that way. We actually, which turned out to be quite nice, we got to kind of spend one last episode actually hanging out with our characters and relaxing with them, something that they don't get to do very often. Hold on.
Did it feel like you're getting
what are you looking for? Hold on. Keep it rolling. Say what you're gonna say. I gotta find something. I'm listening.
Understood. Did you feel like they were just rewarding us for our efforts? As I stare at Noah's blank wall. It's actually not blank. There's some great posters. Les Mis, that's always a good one. Kill Bill's really great. Doctor Strange.
Where do you see Les Mis, bro?
Is that not like? No, that isn't. What is that?
That is George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
Oh,
this one
looks shockingly so. I'm gonna find this Les Mis poster.
I know the Les Mis poster you're talking about, but yeah, it's definitely the angle. Yeah, no, that's the daughter who gets bit in the basement in Night of the Living Dead. Yeah.
I am so wrong.
Creepy. Yeah,
but everybody.
I was like, shit. Do I have a Les Mis poster? I don't even know if I've ever seen. I definitely haven't seen the musical version. I've seen the Liam Neeson one from back in the day. Okay, I'm not cutting any of this, so sorry. My girlfriend needs me to find headphones for her real quick. Give me 2 seconds.
No worries. this is normally where we put in the plug for whatever we're sponsored by, but as a newbie, I don't know who we're sponsored by. So listen to Noah's music on Spotify or Apple Music. I believe it's on Apple Music. It might be on more than one streaming service. I couldn't be entirely sure. Let's ask him once he gets back, which should be anytime now. Watching his shadow. Ah, man. What a great moment for podcast history. And he's back.
She was looking for headphones that were literally sitting right in front of me on Gavin's mic stand from the last time he was over.
You'd be surprised. I do the same stuff.
I was looking right past them. Okay. Where were we? Sorry.
Again,
and apologies to our listeners because I didn't cut any of that. So you heard all of that. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually not sure who our sponsors are, but I just tried to do a plug for them real quick.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the effort. We do that often. We do ads for companies that don't exist or people who aren't actually our sponsors. So it's very in keeping with the theme of the network. Okay. So
yes.
I think I was saying something
we got
about
to hang out.
We got to hang out with them. So we pick up and they we open in flashback, which is where I was like, oh shit, I know who's not making it to the end of this season. As soon as we opened there, I was like, this is his last episode. I was just I knew it was coming. Young Spear though, and his father, who is a little more on the ape side of things than the man side of things, who looks so badass and so cool. Just a great opening action set piece. I love that they opened with this because we got to have a nice, like, very kind of chill middle before things get very rough. But yeah, dude, what did you? I mean, absolutely brutal scene, but seeing like how he learned from his father and like that was all very, very effective. What do you think?
Revalidating the character, you know, like you always knew that he was good at it, and then you see the root of that experience, and you're like, oh man, that's wild. But also like how he's only like one generation removed from an ape.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he is the true like savage that he's been this entire time, but learning at the same time. So it was just really nice to see. I mean, it was a brilliant sequence, but it just kind of lived up to every other episode we've seen at this point, where I'm like, well, they had to do something.
Yeah,
and they did that.
Great stuff. Shortly after that, we get back to Mira's homeland, and we get her brief little backstory of basically, you know, she had a love prior, and he was unceremoniously killed in front of her before she was taken into slavery. But they make it back to her place, and initially, of course, it's like, oh my God, was everybody wiped out by, you know, the evil queen that we were dealing with at some point? Like, you know, maybe that happened already, but no, there's like an intact civilization. And then we're kind of back into episode 2 territory of this season of like, okay, well, now even though we know in the background, it's like there is impending doom still after you guys. And of course, as soon as I see it's a whole civilization, I'm like, oh my God, don't bring it here. Like, don't bring it to this peaceful civilization. Like, this is going to be terrible. So that had me on edge, of course, but also I'm sitting there going like, okay, but yeah, for as far as they know right now, the heat is off, so to speak. They've kind of made it through quite the gauntlet to get here. And yeah, I guess we never really knew this was our ultimate goal, but obviously it's like, yeah, Mira came from somewhere. So yeah, I guess that's where we're heading back to. And now how's Spear and Fang and family now? How do they fit in with any kind of like regular society? And I love that, of course, they have the peacekeeper of Mira there to like explain themselves essentially, because if not, that could have gotten out of hand very quickly. But sorry, you were about to say something and I cut you off a second ago.
Oh no, it's really just, it was nice watching it because you've seen them penetrate all these other civilizations and just wreak absolute havoc. Mm-hmm. And then they get here and they have that bridge and then everything is fine. They're not incapable of being civil. They just had to find where they belonged. I thought it was a really nice. It was probably one of my favorite sequences of the entire season, mostly just because everything led up to it. Yeah. Where it was still nice to just like, you guys deserve this.
Absolutely. And we should mention in the midst of this, they're just doing like the most adorable shit possible with the T-Rex cubs. The one trying to like jump in the water and immediately sinking multiple times until like the brother or sister is like, no, here's how you do it. Here's how you swim. That was great. And we've had the establishment of like whether he fully understands the implications of it or not, he has started praying to the moon the same way that Mira does. So that's taken a step further where there's a whole like kind of ritual ceremony in the evening with these moon gods, dancers, and all sorts of stuff. And I thought it was interesting that he kind of immediately is overwhelmed by, oh yeah, but I don't understand all the customs and like, am I doing this right? And like, ultimately, I think I feel more comfortable back over here with my family. And he just gets up and leaves and goes and sits with, the family he's come to know.
Yeah.
And then you have Mira kind of trying to bridge the gap of bringing him in. And the biggest laugh of the entire episode to me, which is, they put him in the little hut. He doesn't really know how to sit in there. And then immediately Fang just tears through the wall. That was definitely the biggest laugh. That was great. And again, she seems okay with it. And like they're, it seems like they got a little family unit here.
Yeah.
And this was, outside of the actual like ending itself, this was kind of, when I keep thinking back to it, this is the most emotional part for me, which is that Spear goes and finally, they found safe harbor. They're in a place where there's not this tension of like, oh, is it okay both of us being here and everything? It's like this seemingly this is gonna work. It's the first time I've had a chance to breathe, and it's like, what's he gonna do? And the fact that what he chooses to do is sit down and tell his story essentially in the one way that he can, that he's kind of pieced together over time. And like, we've seen him do elements of it, but I think also that key cave painting sequence about midway through this season ties together nicely for like, he seemed to carry that forward. And he basically, stays up all night and tells their entire adventure together in pictograph. And I was just like, oh, I was so blown away by it. And the more and more I keep thinking about it, it's just like, the things that will last from this. And it's like, it's a dying era and all of this, but it's like, but that seemingly, that's something that somebody could discover tomorrow in an ancient ruin or whatever.
Yeah.
And that continuity of like, you want to think of this as like a purely fantasy world, that's fine too. You want to think of it as a weird sideways version of our own universe, it doesn't matter. But that continuity of just like, yes, his story's about to end, but it will live on in this form. And the idea that like, dude, the idea that this show we've been watching could just be based on a really wild interpretation of the same cave painting that he ultimately draws is just great stuff, man. I love
that. Was the moment in the episode where I knew that this was his
just
last
gone.
one.
Yeah.
And I didn't pick on it as quick, but when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, like this is it, like what does he have left to tell? He's made it.
Yeah.
Because we weren't aware, as viewers, we weren't aware of his destination the entire seasons. And then just like, this is it. This is it. We made it.
Yeah. And to that point of not being sure, like, is he fully on the chopping block or not? It's like we open with that flashback, but then we also get the little bit of Mira backstory. And I was like, I was kind of like, that would be really tragic if like they get back to her people and then somehow she sacrifices in the midst of it. But that's where I firmly was like, no, it's gotta be Spear that's going out here.
Yeah.
And they had, I really wasn't worried about the pups at this point. I was like, I think the kids are okay. And I didn't see a scenario where all of a sudden it would be Fang. So I was pretty firmly convinced by the time that the Viking shows up. Is there anything I'm missing kind of prior? Anything else that stood out to you before?
Just that really sweet moment. Like the Fang going back into the house that he's in is really great. But like prior to that, when Fang heard something and she picks up her kids and just puts them in front of Spear and
Oh
like
my
walks
god,
out of the
dude.
cave. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That totally
That
got
was
me too.
oh
Yeah.
man. I almost rewound it just to like see if I could experience that magic again. It
Yeah.
was yeah. Because like
That's the
yeah, the
God.
entire second season is just like riding on this tension of this like weird misstep they had in the first couple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire time, ever since then, I was always wondering if that was repaired. And
Right.
then this is when I find out the very last episode. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we made it.
They're
We're
still
all good now.
buddies. They still trust each other. Yeah. It was just just
Yeah.
all the feels, man. God, I love this show.
Yeah.
So then this big fucking seemingly unbeatable force shows up, and what ensues is, I mean, inarguably, I think one of like the top three best action scenes. There are frames from this that I'm like, I want like this entire wall behind me to be a giant blown out wallpaper of when he basically has been blasted with flame and comes just roaring back at this thing. So but yeah, I mean, there's that moment immediately where Mira kind of looks back over and sees that the pups are there by themselves, and then you get this cut to the frame of like, hey, guess what? They're doing what they always do. They're riding into battle together. And again, there was that little bit of a moment of like, oh shit, is Fang in danger? But I'm so glad they didn't do anything to her, that she got to make it out. But I mean, again, take any like still frame from this sequence and just fucking put it in a museum, dude. I was so blown away. But yeah, they get separated by the fire. I mean, it's literally throwing out like flame beams. It's like, what are we gonna do? Seriously, what are we gonna do? They get chased basically up to an outcropping. They have nowhere else to go. And I mean, yeah, that's the moment, dude. Fucking Spear self-sacrifices in the most like badass, raged out, heavy metal looking fucking pose you've ever seen him strike. Just pounces on this thing and just is just slamming it down the side of this mountain. And it's this simultaneous thing where I'm like, there's no way he comes out of this, but what a fucking way to go out at the same time. I was like, this is so fucking cool. They get down to the very bottom. He's like a burnt husk of himself. And then we see that moment of, I guess, another kind of lingering thing. The giant devil monster guy who reanimated the Viking and sent him on his revenge quest and everything, seemingly is like, well, you couldn't pull it off either. I'm gonna like suck you back down to hell. And so that is kind of a lingering thing where I'm like, that could be an element that unites all the seasons, is this overall villain or something like that. That could be interesting. But I also thought interesting that he never fully came back into play. And then we get, like I said, the burnt husk of Spear who's still hanging in there. And we get something that I think even still seeing it in, an Adult Swim show, something that airs after 10 o'clock or whatever. And as tame as it was, I was like, this is pretty bold that we're literally having a deathbed sex scene in this show. And I don't feel weird about it. At the same time, I honestly am like, this is really beautiful, man. Go ahead. Sorry.
It speaks to just how well they tell their stories, man. Like, because the way they framed it and everything, like, it was kind of out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, that's happening. But my second thought was, oh, I'm glad that's happening.
Right.
Because he like provides you every sort of context to see why she's doing what she's, there's like, it didn't feel gratuitous. There's like, you see legitimate motivations.
Yes.
between this action, and then you get to see the payoff, which is like, oh yeah, so he's not gone, like not
Yes.
100%.
Yes. It's the ultimate, like, okay, they weren't, they didn't
Yeah.
make it absolutely gut wrenching. They give us a
Yeah.
triumphant note at the end. But
Yeah.
yeah, her coming in, and again, that's why I had in rewatching it, I had such a connection to when he lays out that story. But the idea that they've never been able to fully communicate with each other beyond
Nope.
like Mira, and again, Aaron
Mhm.
LaPointe, who the voice actor for Spear, I'm just like the range of emotion and everything he communicates just through his grunts and stuff, but
Yeah.
the inflections of how he says Mira throughout the
Mhm.
second season to put so much of where it's like I feel like there's paragraphs of dialogue in
Yeah.
the one word that he's saying. It's just
Yeah.
incredible stuff. But yeah, him kind of like saying Mira for one last time before that scene plays out,
Yeah.
her realizing he had a family. We
Yeah.
are his family now. Like that's
Mhm.
clearly what he's been searching for. He's so protective of the eggs and now the pups and like
Yeah.
all of this. And for her to like put all of that together, and we get that, and then just that one final frame of, dude,
Yeah.
we got 3 full-grown T-Rexes now. We got
Yep.
Mira, one of the coolest, fucking most badass ladies ever, and we have Spear and Mira's daughter,
Yeah.
riding on the back of a fucking dinosaur the same way her dad did.
Yeah.
Triumphant image, and just I was just like, that's it. You don't ever need, like, I don't ever
Yeah.
need any more of it. I can't wait to see what they do with what the series becomes and what Genndy Tartakovsky does in general outside of this. As I know he's got other stuff in the works, we will definitely be talking about those in the future.
Yep.
But I could not have been more satisfied,
No,
dude. And
you can't, like, to bring them back in any sort of context would almost be disrespectful. It's like that they tied
yes,
it up so well. This story is done. And I'm fine with it being done because it reached a natural point. You gave me everything I wanted. It almost felt like after all the emotional turmoil of 2 seasons, that this episode was just like a little treat. It's
it
like,
really
here you
was.
go.
And maybe,
You put up with
and
me for this long, you know?
I'm curious if that's a little bit of the fan reaction of like,
Yeah.
oh, it didn't stay true to like how hardcore and rough it is. And I'm like, I mean,
Listen, I'm
yeah,
going through
but
it right now, and I needed something like this. You know?
exactly. I'm like, the just it earned it to me.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a false, like, oh, here's a happy tacked on ending. It
Mhm.
felt like this is where this story's gonna end.
Yeah.
And that again, we this whole season we've been talking about maybe he is the bridging of the gap between these two eras. And again, the fact that there's still dinosaurs at play
Yep.
is awesome. But yeah, I feel like having that next generation go forward or whatever. And I'm like, dude, if like I'm trying to think of what the gap was between OG Samurai Jack and then when he came back to do the final season. But I'm
Yeah.
like, if he wanted to take like 5 to 10 years off and then come back and tell like you know, the adult offspring of Spear and Mira, um, like the further adventures or whatever, I would watch it. I'd be
Yeah.
excited, but I don't need more of that story right now.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I think they ended it beautifully, and yeah, take
Yeah.
some
That's a
time.
good point.
Take some time.
Yeah. I just, again, I think that's what's brilliant is you push these characters hard enough and make us care about them this much that I don't mind the happy ending. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
like I've been with them through everything, felt just as frustrated, confused, and terrified. And then now it's just like done, and like they get to rest. Now I get to rest because I saw them get to
Yes.
rest.
Now, I say all of that to say, if you did tell me tomorrow that they were going to give Genndy Tartakovsky and Company like a $60 million budget to do an hour and a half long Primal movie that is that final shot that we saw. But what are they going to do? They're going to hunt down the big devil Satan thing that essentially was the cause of Spear's death. And they have to go unite every like civilization we've met so far and take down a bunch of crazy ass fantasy creatures in the meantime. And it's just a giant like Lord of the Rings-esque adventure over the course of an hour and a half, and it's a movie, I would not be upset with that. But I also don't need it right now. I also don't need it right now.
Like, I'm not looking for it, but if I
Right.
found it, I'd watch it.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts as we're, I mean, I think I will look forward now to kind of binging through the entirety of the series, which seems like a totally doable thing in like, you know, an afternoon or a weekend if you really wanted to. And I really think obviously there's this real jump in the breadth of the storytelling and the depth of the storytelling in the second season. But I think, you know, I think there's a clear track laid across those 20 episodes. And again, the primal theory in retrospect now kind of feels like, yeah, did you guys like, was it a budget saver or was it like, I don't know. It does feel a little
about that in the entertainment.
Oh, I might have missed that because I was like cherry picking the article. So yeah,
I kind
did he
of
say?
skimmed through it just while I was waiting for you to come on. But yeah, he said it was literally just like a reset. Like there's all these fan theories and stuff. He's like, no, I just like we did so much with them that we had to kind of reset the momentum to get back into what's happened.
And again, I think in the context of where it hits in the season, I think it worked for that. We needed a break, like emotionally speaking, and I definitely served that purpose.
He's, I think, in like a roundabout way, what it was saying was basically just circling back around to like, okay, you guys just watched them do all this stuff. This is an explanation as to why they did that. So I know it's like heavy coming off that episode with these like people that like characters you come to see as heroes. Here's an explanation / a breather. Now let's get back into the story.
Yeah.
Which when framed in that light made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I talked a little bit at the time. I guess my kind of qualm with it was I was like, I feel like you and I were on that wavelength of already like coming to terms with the stuff it was asking. And that was my thing is I felt like it was a little bit like, you know, talking to the people in the very back of the crowd who maybe were still watching it as this pure like, oh, the badass show where they just like show a bunch of brutal violence and like it's so cool and like it's so metal, bro. Like, and I'm like, I definitely think there's still some people who were watching it that way, but it also felt like, yeah, give us a little bit of credit, man. Like I see the themes you're exploring. Like you're doing enough work sans dialogue. You don't all of a sudden need to put it verbally in there. But again, like as a you know, not a placeholder, that sounds derogatory, but like, you know, as a breather, which it was effective. There's definitely other things they could have done as a breather. We could have gone off and told a weird side story, but then I think people would have like if we would have done a weird side story in the universe where we didn't see them at all, I feel like people may have been even more like, what the hell is this? So
and I mean, if you're gonna do a breather too, let the audience breathe. Like just I appreciate that, just taking it entirely out of context, because now I'm not asking questions about characters that I know are in this universe that I just might not see again.
Absolutely. And again, I'm like, if that episode dropped like 2 weeks from now and it was like the Primal Halloween special, like it would not have felt weird to me, but it was just the fact of where it hit and everything. But I definitely want to go and like actually read that full sit down interview. See if he has any other nuggets.
It's pretty great. He's really good at just all right, I know people want to like speculate and all this stuff. Nope, X, Y, and Z.
He's a very no nonsense kind of guy. That's part of what I like about his persona in general. Yeah,
it's just like it's fun to like speculate and have fan theories and all that stuff. But I love when just the creator confirms.
Right. I mean, he's like, calm down. Seriously.
It's like a high compliment to have people be able to interpret your art in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
And like, I think he wants the audience to have that, but also at the same time, I wrote the story with this intent, so I'm going to honor that intent.
Yeah. And again, this whole thing that ended up being about found family, which is like one of, I would say, the most easy go-tos in genre storytelling just immediately like start pulling on my heartstrings. But anytime it's like, oh, these people didn't, they didn't have anybody, and then they found each other, and like they're from completely different walks of life. Like that shit is always effective. But to have a story that was kind of anchored by that in the very first episode of these two characters like bonded by tragedy, a shared trauma, who, are just fighting and hoping against all hope that maybe there's something else out there. There is some kind of respite eventually. Maybe they can get back to whatever they had, a bit of what they had before, and they go through hell to get there, but they do get there, and it's maybe not in the perfect like bow satisfying, like they ride off into the sunset, everybody's okay, but it again ends, I think, realistically. His Spear's time had to end. There has to be this transition to the next phase of man. He's a dying breed when the show starts, and we only continue to reinforce that. But again, what a way to go, man. Like what just the coolest way to go that I could think of.
Not do that.
Right.
Like he's going to go out like that regardless of who it was.
Oh my God. Again, dude, hopefully, people hit up our Patreon, but if things start going well, you're going to see a giant wallpaper print behind me right now.
My friend's a graphic designer. We could talk to some people.
Dude, that too. I also am quickly debating. I'm like, I think I get a Spear and Fang tattoo at some point. I think I need a giant, just badass metal album cover of
just
them.
A chess piece.
A chess piece with them, with him writing. I think that's very modest and appropriate for how I feel about this show.
Exactly. All 2 seasons of.
I didn't text you to see when you had watched or whatever. Obviously, when we do our Instagram reviews, just we throw up numbers and stuff just to keep people abreast of what we're watching until we get a chance to talk about it on the podcast. So I will ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, Primal season 2, where are you at?
Oh man, I don't have any frame of reference for scales, so people. Scales, but
it is most certainly your own personal scale, and so whatever your gut says.
I'd say it's just like a hard 8.5. Like
8.5. Now
there are very few like 9 and 10 shows.
And see, a lot of people would say that I maybe am a little hyperbolic, and I throw around my 10s too easily. For context, from the get-go, I gave the first 5 episodes of Primal when it was part 1. I gave that a 10 out of 10. I reviewed part 2 a year later, gave that a 10 out of 10, because anytime I could point to something and I'm like, that there's nothing like it on television. It's executing in a genre, but at the absolute like peak and height of it. Anytime I feel like I could sit there and be like, this is one of the best animated shows on television, and then drop the animated from that as a caveat, this is one of the best shows on television through its storytelling. That I think it has maintained. And again, it's weird because I feel like I already am like, I set the bar pretty fucking high with the 10. That's a standard to maintain. And I'm like, well, by that scale, by that metric, season 2, this show's operating on like a 13 out of 10. So I don't even know where I'm at now. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, I was just curious. I will be throwing that up in tandem with when the episode drops. But
it was between an 8.5 and a 9 for me. But given that argument and thinking about it now, I'd bump it up to a 9. Like there's like, I'm still trying to figure out what my standard for a 10 out of 10 show is. Because
I have this conversation with friend of the pod, Brendan Riley, who our tastes vary quite a bit, as you've probably seen from some of the reviews on there. But he, for the longest time, he was like, I don't know what's a 10 for me, man. Like, and I'm like, well, yeah, you kind of have to establish that in your brain as like, what are some other 10s? And to me, every movie or TV show is also a case by case basis where it's like, well, am I judging it against everything else this director has done or
Mhm.
everything else this actor has done? Am I judging it against other movies of this type from the last 5 years or of all
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
It's all arbitrary. It's my mood on a given day. It's everything.
Yeah.
But I got to say the high it left me out, again, with the primal theory, I'm tempted to be like, well, there was that one episode, but I'm also
Yeah.
like, but everything else was so fucking strong that I'm like, I
Yeah.
feel just as good, if not more hyped on it than I was with season one, parts A and B. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's definitely in my, let's see where it ranks. Actually, I always have my running list for the year. So if I'm putting it in the 10 territory, which I most certainly am, right now it is my fifth favorite show of the year. But again, we've talked
Yeah.
again, nobody cares about this. I'm fully aware. Sorry, listeners. You can thank you for sticking around. We loved having you. Now I'm going to get really, really boring and technical about something nobody cares about. Okay. So here's a perfect example. The Bear, season one.
Yes.
That's
Mhm.
my favorite show of the year. I have it
Yeah.
on my number one slot.
Mhm.
Objectively, I would give The Bear a
Okay.
9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Partly because I think there's a world where a season two of this show blows my mind even further. I think it
Yeah.
could reach that 10 out of 10 status.
Okay.
And part of my 9 out of 10 in that case is stuff you and I talked about where I'm like, well, there's so
Mhm.
much unmined territory. There's
Yeah.
so much stuff that they didn't do. I'm excited to see where they go. And like, there's also the kind of like, I feel like the show, because it came out all at once, you kind of don't feel it, but it's like those first few episodes, it is kind of finding its legs a little bit. Like
Yeah.
in retrospect, the episode where they go and do like the hot dog cookout for Oliver Platt,
Yeah.
like it does kind of feel like this weird clandestine one-off that like, oh, the
Yeah.
show never really became that, where it's like, oh, let's get
Mhm.
characters like paired off and like
Yeah.
going off on adventures. It was like, maybe it is the restaurant. I think the restaurant
Yeah.
is the ecosystem we need to stay within.
Yeah.
So like little things like that, I'm like, yeah, I see like little rooms for improvement. But again, the thing I had the most emotional reaction to that I thought was like boring into my soul at certain times, it was The Bear. So
Yeah.
that's my favorite. That's my number one.
Okay.
But other things that are up there right now are like We Own This City, which I don't know if you
Yeah.
started it yet.
Not yet.
But to me, just 10 out of 10, unimpeachable. One of the best fucking things that's been on television in years. It was incredible. Better Call Saul, final season. That's my number three. That's up there as well. And then Barry season three, also ahead of Primal. Those are all like tens to me, personally. I thought like just yeah, that for context of how I approach things. But again, it's your own individual scale.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense when.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you frame it out like that, because like for me, a 10 out of 10 show would be I can drop anybody in the middle of any episode, and they'll dig it.
Right.
Like even if you don't necessarily know the story or stuff, and I feel like Primal is a bit of an acquired taste.
Oh, 100%.
So,
There's definitely.
So in the context of watching it from start to finish, both like season 1, season 2, yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. But that extra point is missing where I have to like ramp up an explanation to get someone to watch it,
100%. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's something that we definitely have embraced. We've talked about a lot throughout the course of this pod this season. But yeah, if you're somebody who is turned off by violence, like in general, regardless of whether it's live action or animated, it's like, this show is not for you. Like, it's not gonna be digestible. You're not gonna come around to it if you have a fundamental problem with that. And as a person who is pretty numb, unfortunately, to on-screen violence, both animated and live action, there are parts of this show where I am audibly just like, God damn, like that's rough. Like, or oh, that was brutal. But it again, it never feels gratuitous. It never feels unearned. It is the world of this show. And it never felt like it all of a sudden was like, oh, we're getting like extra graphic for the sake of it. It was like, no, this is the firmly established tone of this world. And they've never strayed from it. It never became something it wasn't, or seemed like it never felt like it was trying to ramp up that angle either to like bring in more people where it's like, oh, dude, you see last week, like, this is the most bloody thing I've ever seen. Like, you have to see this shit. It never felt like it was going for those kind of, those tropes or those tricks, if you will.
No, you're exactly right. There's one film critic, I forget who said it, but it's like a good director will teach you how to watch their movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing, like over the course of both seasons, where he's teaching us this is what's going to happen. There's always going to be a means to an end. So enjoy the artistry of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I see a battle sequence or something like this in the Primal universe, I'm not expecting anything gratuitous. I know it will end, and it will end in a way that moves the story forward in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Yeah, and in that instance, anything they do is not gratuitous, and it's a really smart way of writing, because since you've stuck yourself within these kind of small rules, you can now do whatever you want within the confines of those rules. And when they do it, it's incredible, right? Like, that's when we get some of our best fight sequences and basically the best animation of the show. Just the way they handle action in an animation is great.
Mm-hmm.
But just knowing that, all right, yeah, that might be wild and crazy or whatever, but it is serving the story in some way.
Absolutely. It's the key element that I feel like so many people forget. But again, when it is done well and correctly, and it's not an easy thing to pull off. I would say it's something akin to, like, doing black comedy these days. So something that's very, very difficult as well, or satire, which is also very difficult. But when you watch something like Fury Road, for instance, a movie that we all talked about, we all loved, was a huge hit, and I feel like nobody learned the right lessons from, which is like the beauty of that movie is it's telling its story through action. The entire time. The movie never slows down to have exposition. All of the exposition is integrated into the primary narrative you're watching. We never need to cut away for a flashback or anything like that. And that's what I think so many, you watch a movie, for instance, like The Gray Man from earlier this year on Netflix, and it's like, that feels like a movie where it's like, okay, we have 10 set pieces, 10 action set pieces that we want to film in 10 different locations. Now let's try and wrap a narrative somewhere around these things. And you're like, that's not the way you should be approaching any of this.
The point of this
you
is
should
tell
be
a story,
approaching,
and you don't have the
here's
story.
a narrative.
You have
and those action sequences are roadblocks that tell you something about the person as they move on to the next objective. Not this shit. I'm doing a bunch of visual metaphors for people who cannot see this. Okay. But yeah, that's taking the wrong lessons from it. But I'm just like, it's when it's done right and you can tell character and narrative while you're doing action. Nothing compares to that, dude. It feels so good and satisfying. Like, oh God, this show was incredible. I absolutely loved every second of it. I can't wait to go back. Honestly, I am going to take an emotional break, and if there's a lot of other shit I got to catch up on, we can talk about some of that. But
palate cleansers.
Yeah. So, okay. I had quite the night of television the night I watched this. So on Friday, I worked a half day. I came home and I was like, it had been a week. And I was like, you know what? But it's all worth it, because on Friday you get to come home, and whatever order you want to approach it in, man, you have a new Rings of Power. You have 2 episodes of Atlanta, first 2 back for season 4, final season, and you got the Primal finale. And what I ended up doing, I did the first 2 Atlanta, loved them both. The first one had me bawling my eyes out. I was so moved by it. I go into Rings of Power. I was like, not as hot on it as I was on 3, but it feels like a table setting episode. I think 5 will be amazing. I enjoyed it. And then I'm like, do I push my luck? I was like, do I watch Primal? I was like, what if the Primal finale lets me down, man? What if? And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna do it. And I I was crying by the end of it, but I was just like, they did it, man. They pulled it off. They
Right.
gave me a satisfied. I got to say goodbye to my friends, and it was it was beautiful, man. I could not have been more happy. So yeah, that was my Friday night of entertainment. I'm still kind of recovering from it, to be honest. And then Saturday night, I chose to watch a movie that I probably shouldn't have. Did you happen to see our review of Speak No Evil?
I didn't watch the full one, but I did
Okay.
see how everybody
Basic
said do not watch this
Yes,
movie.
basically uh I had heard about it coming out of Sundance that it was like, this one's gonna cause a bit of a stir. Just
Oh
heads up.
boy.
Okay. So I already had that in the back of my head, but then Mayfield texts me about it. He's like, well, that was one of the most infuriating watches of all time. And I'm like, wait, you can watch it now? And I did not realize that Shudder picked it up,
Oh.
and it's available on Shudder's app right now, which I have through AMC Plus because I just got done watching Better Call Saul. So, and it's about to be horror season, so I'm keeping my Shudder subscription. Plug for Shudder, who does not sponsor this show, but is an excellent service for horror movies and documentaries and all sorts of great stuff for spooky season. So I go on and I watch Speak No Evil, which you can go read the plot description somewhere if you want to. Basically, it's a Danish horror adjacent film.
And
It's a horror
anytime I
movie.
hear horror movie not made in America,
You're
I
like,
immediately get
okay,
nervous.
my
Yeah, right?
guard's up. I'm
Yep,
scared.
here we go.
Yeah. So a Danish couple on vacation with a small kid meets another couple who also has a young kid as well. They are Dutch from Holland, and I didn't realize how land masses work, but it's like they live 8 hours away from each other
Yeah.
in their normal lives. So they come back from vacation, and basically the Dutch couple invites the Danish couple um, to come visit for the weekend. It's like, okay, cool. And like the husband's totally down for it. Like, oh, they seem really nice, blah, blah. And the wife is like, well, yeah, but we kind of barely know them. Like, you want to go hang out for 3 days? Like, I don't know. So they take the kid, they get there, and basically, like, the nice people they met on vacation are like still seemingly there, but like some cracks are starting to show where you're like, something up with these people. Like, the fuck's going on here? And it just basically gets more and more uncomfortable from there. It's extremely well made, very, very well acted, and also one of the like the last like 15 to 20 minutes of it will have you like threatening the life of the director and the writer, where you're like,
Jesus.
you motherfuckers, like, seriously? And then you kind of have to let yourself breathe and think about it for a little bit afterwards, because it's done with a point and a purpose, but god damn, it is very upsetting and hard to watch, and is one of those things that I cannot in good conscience recommend to anyone that has children in particular.
Oh,
That's why
jeez.
Mayfield and I have been telling everybody, don't watch it. It is very,
Yeah.
very good. And if you have a stomach for like the darkest of the dark, then by all means, but it's basically a dare to watch this, is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
man.
Like it'll fuck up your day. I'm still thinking, I woke up the next
Yeah.
morning after watching it, and I'm just like, God damn it. Well, now I'm gonna have to think about this for the rest of the fucking day. It's one of
Right.
those.
I can't unsee this now.
Yes, it's incredibly well made, very effective movie. Maybe save it for October, but we're talking not an ounce of fun in it. I will tell you that. It's not even like a slyly subversive.
Yeah.
It's just it's excruciatingly uncomfortable, and then it ends and you are again just furious with what you've just seen. So at your own peril, Speak No Evil is available on Shudder.
I've just got
everybody.
the Google page up for it right now. 6.7 on IMDb, which is generally an indicator of a great horror movie.
Yes, IMDb,
Yeah.
anything 6 or above, I'm like, is usually
Yeah.
good territory
Yeah.
for a horror movie, because
horror
horror is so
movies
divisive in general, and you can't
especially
look at critics' reviews for horror movies.
Yeah,
for the
especially
most
like
part.
auteur and like high art cinema tends to actually be like rated lower on IMDb and Amazon
Yes.
than other movies, just because it's like the people that are giving those reviews are just basing it on gut emotional reaction.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean that it's not a great movie. I'm actually trying to build an app about this, but we can talk about it offline because I have to do a final project for my analytics program. So I've been working on it for a little bit, but I've noticed there's been this huge discrepancy between user submitted reviews versus how good I think the movie is. So I think The Lighthouse.
Yes.
That was absolutely brilliant. It's got 3 stars on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, because people suck.
yeah, but I know where those 3 stars come from, and I find that there's a connection between A24, Robert Pattinson, and a movie I thought was good and a 3-star Amazon review. So I'm basically trying to figure out how to connect.
High Life is probably sitting a little more around a 2.5.
Oh yeah,
that one's a little tougher to get there.
Awful reviews. I thought it was pretty great. I'm not gonna watch it again.
Oh yeah, no, that was a one and done. But I'm glad I checked it out. That was a ride. It was
but it's almost like this rating system. I'm looking for specific numbers more than I'm looking for a good rating.
Right.
If that makes sense. Because I know this upset enough people that I'm interested. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's that to me almost is a barrier to entry. It's if everybody was just kind of oh yeah, it was good, I'm a little less inclined to be excited about it. If it's a horror movie, you know what I'm saying? I want there to be a little I don't know, this pissed me off, or this was fucked up.
Yeah.
So anyways, we could wrap up our Primal discussion. Thank you everybody for joining us this season. Mikey will be back in some capacity very, very soon, definitely in October when we start getting spooky around these parts. So we'll talk more about that off mic. But dude, thank you so much for doing this with me for the last couple of weeks. And thank you to our little Primal Pod and Cast family that we've grown over the last couple of weeks. I hope you guys will stick around for other stuff on the feed. But yeah, we picked up a decent amount of new listenership just from this little show. I will also shout out, because we've only mentioned it once or twice, but I feel like there's probably a little bit of crossover. If you're an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan or The Legend of Korra on the network over on its own feed, there's a show called Bending Not Breaking, hosted by Mr. Ben Pruitt and Mr. Sunshine Mayfield. And they just wrapped season 6 of Bending Not Breaking. They have one more season of Legend of Korra to cover, and they will have done the whole franchise, essentially, including the Dragon Prince, which they did in their off time. So if you like any of those shows from the Avatar creators, go check out that show. I will also plug my new album, which has been out for a couple of weeks now. It's called Flowerhead. I go by nARK, lowercase n, all caps ARK. You can find me on all the major music streaming services. But that's the latest record. And stay tuned if you follow me on any of those services, because we got some spooky stuff coming just in time for October. Some John Carpenter inspired synthy jams, and one also inspired by Cronenberg movies, but doesn't sound like Cronenberg stuff. You'll see, or you'll hear rather. That is all my plugs. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here, sir?
None of this time is my 1 week without school until December. So I'm going to catch up on this list that I keep referencing.
That yes, a plug for Mikey's ever-growing list that he will finally be getting to, and that'll give us plenty of ammunition of stuff to talk about next month. So,
most definitely.
Yes. So this, for now, we will resurrect it whenever season 3 comes back up. But for now, this is the season finale of Primal Pod and Cast. Thank you guys so much for listening. I have been Noah.
I've been Mikey.
And we've been dragged. I was going to try and do like a great wrap up where it ties everything together, but
that's what you don't spoon feed the audience. They know what they got.
Exactly. Yes. Stay primal, stay pod, stay cast. Something like that. Thanks. Nailed it, right? Nailed it. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much for listening. We'll both talk to you soon. Bye-bye.